Hey, it's Ted McGrath, and welcome to today's show. So there's so much to get into. I'm going to talk about MSTR and BMNR. I'm going to give you 15 reasons for each of them, why this could be a great bull run, and they could do very well over the next couple months. I'm also going to talk about some price predictions on Ethereum and just show you a model today, and you can make up your own mind of what you think it's going to go to based on data. Also going to show you a recent poll that Saylor did on how many people think Bitcoin will go over $150,000. And we're going to jump in and talk about also inflation. I'm going to show you an example of a $100,000 investment, $1 million investment, and how taxes, inflation, fees, and asset inflation eats away at that wealth. And I'm going to give you real numbers so you can see them on a spreadsheet and mess around with it. Okay. So without further ado, let's get in. Not tax advice, not financial advice, not legal advice. Also down below is my free book, Money Game. If you want to grab it, I just released it. You can get it for free down below. All right. So full disclaimer, not financial advice, but let's get in the game and let's take a look at what's happening in the world today. So I'm going to cover both today, MSTR and BMNR. I'm also going to go through this calculator here to show you a $100,000 investment or $1 million investment and how it gets eaten away by wealth that will come, or taxes, I should say, and inflation, and that will come later. So let's jump in. So first thing is I'm looking at MicroStrategy, which is now known as Strategy. DAT means digital asset treasury. And basically, this is a roadmap looking at strategy from 8/11/2020 when it was at $13 and its journey all the way up to $335, which was at some point in this year. It was at there maybe last week, recently this week. But there's a big increase over a 5-year period. So this shows you the strength of the right digital asset treasury companies, like Strategy having Bitcoin in their treasury. And then we have BMNR that has Ethereum in their treasury. So just shows you the graph of what's possible for these types of companies moving into the future, particularly as we go into BMNR. Since it's fresh and brand new, I'll show you some comparisons that have to do with that. Now, next thing is look at MSTR over the last 5 years. All of today is to give a lot of you increased confidence in MSTR because we want to look at the facts of where this company's come from and also the characteristics that it still has that are super positive to also get rid of uncertainty that some people have. All right. So best performing large cap since its pivot to becoming a Bitcoin treasury company. And if you look at the statistics, Strategy, 93% over that 5-year period. And you have companies like GameStop trailing it and other companies as well. So it's crushed it over the last 5 years and since adopting Bitcoin as their main strategy put in their treasury. And if you look at the case study here and you look at Bitcoin compared to Strategy, you look at Bitcoin back in 8/11/2020, which is right around when Strategy started their treasury company. And so if you look at the Bitcoin price then, I know it's small, but if you see the left here, it says $11,000 Bitcoin price in 8/11/2020. And then Strategy was priced at $13.49. Now, only 6 months later in 2021, only 6 months later, Bitcoin was at $47,000 and Strategy went from $13 to $100 at the time. So you're looking over a 5-year period, you're looking at a 10x with Bitcoin from 11,000 to 108,000 at the time of this illustration, but really today it's 120,000. So you're looking at a 11x or so. And then you're looking at Strategy that did a 25x over that time period. Excuse me, a 25x over that time period, right? So from $13 price point to $335. So this just shows that treasury companies that have Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever on their balance sheet have real potential, particularly if you're the leader in the space like Strategy is, and you're the leader in the space like BMNR is. So we're going to go into that more today, but this is just a good example to show you if you're looking out at 5-year time horizons and you're eyeing BMNR right now and looking where could it be in 5 years, you can look at where Strategy was 5 years ago and look at its unbelievable growth. Okay. So there you have that. Now you look at BitMine BMNR. If you're new to the channel, I'm talking about BMNR and MSTR on this channel right now. This was an illustration done by Tom Lee months ago. So this is when BMNR's treasury was at $9 billion. So when you see 8,979, that's really represented in billions of dollars. And so now the treasury for BMNR is at 13 billion. So how a lot changes in a couple months. And you look at strategy, here it says 69,000, which is really represented in billions, 69 billion. Their treasury today is around 80 billion worth of Bitcoin. So you look at these two leaders in the space, MSTR, $80 billion worth of Bitcoin on the balance sheet, BMNR, $13 billion in their treasury, most of that Ethereum, the great majority, the lion's share, and they're just crushing it as digital asset treasury companies. And there's just no comparison. So this is a really interesting chart, and goes kudos to Tom Lee. Got this off of his site. And so when you look at this, many people are asking, like, where could Ethereum go over the next 3 months? And I'll give you some predictions that come from Tom Lee's mouth, also Standard Chartered Bank, which is a long trusted bank and institution in the financial game for a long time, and more conservative. I'll give you their price prediction. But this just shows you like the Ethereum to Bitcoin ratio. And so when you're looking at it here, and this could show you where, if Bitcoin goes to X, where Ethereum could go. So for those of you who are trying to figure out like what the price point of BMNR could be, you can do your own calculations on this. So rather than guessing and taking what somebody else says, you can kind of look at the data and go, where do I think it'll end up? You can do the same thing for strategy, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to think where you think it's going to end up, okay? So when you look at this number, it looks a little bit like data confusing, but it's not that confusing. So if you look at the 8-year average here, right? That's the Ethereum to Bitcoin ratio. So when you see 0.0479 in 2000, well, that's the 8-year average, okay, in terms of the ratio. But if you look in 2021, the 2021 high right here, right, it says 0.0873. So that's the ETH to Bitcoin ratio. So basically, if I took 0.0873 and I multiplied it by Bitcoin in 2021, around 60-something thousand, 0.0873 times 60-something thousand would get me over a $5,000 price point on Ethereum. Okay. So in 2021, the ETH to Bitcoin ratio in terms of like the price was much higher in terms of where Ethereum was in comparison to Bitcoin in terms of the ratio. The 8-year average is much less. So the 2021 high was at 0.0873. The 8-year average is 0.0479. It's almost half. Okay. So now if you track me here, if you look down here to the left column, all the way to the left here, right, where my arrow's going, all right, right here, it says if Bitcoin goes to 200,000, 150,000, you can pretty much predict where the Ethereum price might go. And so like, let's look at $150,000 Bitcoin here, right? You slide it across, and if Bitcoin goes to 150,000 and the ETH to Bitcoin ratio stays at its 8-year average, you'll have a $7,179 Ethereum. Okay, so important to know, like, okay, if Bitcoin could go to 150,000, and I'm going to go through a poll later. Michael Saylor had a poll. He took a vote, and he's asked people how many think Bitcoin will be over 150,000. I'll give you the data on that soon, okay? So if it goes to 150,000, Ethereum should hit 7,179 based on the 8-year average of ETH to Bitcoin ratio. All right. So if Bitcoin goes to 200,000, then Ethereum could go to $9,572. All right. So when you're looking at like the 150, the $200,000 Bitcoin, I think between 150 and 200,000 is real. I think above 150 is definitely real. I think 200,000 is a bullish scenario. I think somewhere in between there is moderately conservatively real, like 160, 170. Okay. So if you're looking at this now, if you look at Ethereum, and this is where Tom Lee gets his when he says we're looking at a $15,000 Ethereum potentially in 2025 or a $10,000 Ethereum. Now, I think people take what he says out of context quite a bit, because He gives different projections at different times. So I think you got to look at all of them. I've heard him say, we could be looking at 8, 10, 12,000 Ethereum. We could be looking at $15,000 Ethereum. So if you look at $150,000 Bitcoin and Ethereum does what it did in 2021 in comparison to the ratio of Bitcoin price to Ethereum price, even at $150,000 Bitcoin, you could get, see where my cursor is really big, you could get a $13,000 Ethereum. All right. I would say be more conservative and just look at the 8-year average, right? Just look at the 8-year average. So is it possible to get on the 8-year average with Bitcoin at 150,000, a $7,000 Ethereum? Yeah. If Bitcoin goes to 170, is it possible to get an $8,000 or $9,000 Ethereum? Yes, it is. So that's where the statistics come when you hear the prices being thrown around. Now, if you want to figure out where you think BMNR is going to go, so if you think Bitcoin is going to go to 150 and you think ETH to Bitcoin ratio is going to be the same that it's been over the last 8 years, then you could probably just write down, hey, I think that we're going to get a $7,000 Ethereum. And so that would be an increase, like from where it is now to 7,000 would be like a 70% increase. So that means if ETH is going to go up 70%, it's very likely that BMNR is going to go up 70% plus some, because BMNR's it's got about a 30% premium that it's trading at in comparison to the Ethereum that it has on its balance sheet. Okay, so people are willing to pay 30% over what the value of the Ethereum on its balance sheet is actually worth. All right, so that means if you had Ethereum going up by 70% and BMNR went up by another 30%, that means BMNR would go up by 91%. If BMNR went up by another 40%, it would go up by 100%. So that's how you can figure out the basic math on where you could make your own price predictions. If you are curious about BMNR, if you own BMNR, you can look at this chart, and this is a really great chart based on historical longer-term averages of the Ethereum to Bitcoin ratio to determine where Ethereum might go and also determine where BMNR might go. And just make your own predictions and go, where do I think it's going to go? And be conservative for your own benefit. That's what I would say. Not financial advice, but I would say be conservative. I'm not taking the 2021 high of the ETH to Bitcoin ratio. I'm taking the 8-year average here, which is 0.0479. I think it's realistic that they're going to hit the 8-year average in terms of Ethereum to Bitcoin ratio. All right. So that's the idea. And that's how to come up with your own model of price predictions without just listening on, somebody says something on a whim because they're excited or bullish about it. And, I've been very excited and bullish about things before. And, you can look at data and back it up and see what's real for you. And that's the most important thing you can do, is take a look at what's real for you. So this is a great model. If you're just joining us, go back and watch this model, watch this part of the video, because it literally helps you predict with a higher degree of certainty of where price points are going to go, rather than just, hey, I think this might happen. All right. So really, really good model here. So now if we look at the comparison between BMNR and MSTR, and you look at where BMNR has gone in a short period of time, 90 days, 120 days, however long since they announced in June 2025 their strategy, and they raised their first 250 million of Ethereum in June 2025. So it's June, July, August, September. It's been like 4 months that BMNR has been cranking on this. All right. So this gives you a comparison of how fast BMNR is acquiring Ethereum compared to how fast Strategy acquired Bitcoin. All right, if you're just joining us, I'm going through both BMNR and MSTR. I'm going to go through 15 reasons for each of why I think this could be a good bull run and a good time for both stocks. All right. So if you look at this graph, it took Strategy here. You go all the way up here, and Strategy accumulated about $9 billion, and you scroll down here. So if you look at my arrow here, so that 8,912 is really a $9 billion marker right here. Okay. So that's in thousands, but it's really thousands of millions. So it's billions. Okay. So it took them like 1,200 days or so to get to 9 billion in their treasury. And then at this time, BitMine is now at 13 billion in their treasury of acquiring ETH, but and some of that's Bitcoin and some of that's cash, but it's called 13 bill. At this time, when this chart was done, that's $9 billion for BitMine in their treasury within the first, 90 days? That's insane. So when you look at the accumulation of, like, call it 100 days, BitMine's accumulated 13 billion in their treasury now. Let's just call it 9 billion for the sake of this illustration. So within the first 100 days, they acquired, let's say, 9 billion. And then that's within 100 days. And then Strategy did it within about 1,200 days. So you're looking at, like, the BitMine's going 11, 12 times faster in terms of their accumulation of Ethereum that Strategy accumulated Bitcoin. So if people are wondering, like, what is ahead and in store for BMNR, I mean, we've never seen anything like this before. It's insane. Okay, it's insane. So that's it. That's just, like, Strategy was incredibly aggressive in their accumulation, and they were phenomenal, and they laid out the playbook for everybody that followed. So Saylor deserves hats off, kudos to him. But BitMine is just accumulating Ethereum at, like, a lightning fast rate. Hence why I'm bullish on BMNR. All right. You look at the alchemy of BMNR, 5% is what they're going for. So Strategy has over 3% of Bitcoin in their treasury, and we've got BMNR that has over 2% now. And you look at the trading volume, like the 5-day daily average of trading volume of BMNR. BMNR is like 28 on the list. And then Strategy's right above, I think, right around 20 on the list. So these are highly, 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 highly traded stocks because they're super volatile and they're super liquid, and institutions like that. So they're going for 5% BMNR. They're going to get, it's like a layup. They're going to get there on, like, a layup to 5% on their treasury. Like they're now talking in a video that I watched recently with Tom Lee, and the conversation is about, could they go to 10% Ethereum in their treasury? Because meaning they would own 10% of the entire supply of Ethereum. All right. So when you look at BMNR plus MSTR, they control 86% of the digital asset treasury trading volume. So of all the digital asset treasury companies, the trading volume is just monopolized by these two. So BitMine monopolized 35% of the trading. MSTR monopolizes 51% of the trading. So if you ever go and look at trading these stocks and you watch them, I trade BMNR on a daily basis. So if you watch how it moves, it's insane, right? It's insane how much it moves. And it moves like, you know, you'll see it. I mean, you see the price at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, but I mean, you can be at like $65 for BMNR like we were on Monday, and then we're all the way down to $56.70 today at the low. And it closed, I think, at what? We closed at $59 with BMNR today, something like that. $59.10 is what we closed at. So there's a massive amount of volatility, which is why people like to trade it. You know, and then you have the 2x version of these as well, like BMNU is the 2x version of BMNR, and like try trading that. I trade that. That thing's like, that's like a wild stallion you're trying to tame, man. That thing's insane, right? So that's what's happening from a trading perspective in terms of the volume on this. We went through this before a moment ago. It's like, this is the ETH to Bitcoin ratio. The 8-year average is, if you want to take the Bitcoin price, you multiply it by 0.047, which is the 8-year average of what Ethereum to Bitcoin ratio is, and then you'll get the Ethereum price. So if you think Bitcoin is going to go to 150,000, you multiply that 150,000 times 0.04790, and then you'll get the Ethereum price. If you think Bitcoin is going to go to 200,000, you take 200,000, you multiply 200,000 by 0.04790, the 8-year average of ETH to Bitcoin ratio, and then you'll get the Ethereum price at the end of the year, which would be approximately over $9,000, close to $10,000 Ethereum. Okay, so that's how you get the ETH to Bitcoin ratio, and you can kind of figure out where ETH might go in relation to Bitcoin. Okay, all right, so there's that. There's a short seller in the house, Carisdale Capital. They're short selling on BMNR, and you know, whatever, right? BMNR is going to rock it. So here we go. And now for the dark horse BMNR. So I'm going to give you 15 reasons I am bullish on BMNR, and then I'm also going to give you 15 reasons on MSTR, and we're going to go into them now. All right. So the world knows MSTR for Bitcoin, but BMNR is doing the same thing with Ethereum, and maybe faster, and they are doing it faster. So here's 15 reasons BMNR could rip this cycle. other than the ones I just gave you. They've got 2.83 million Ethereum in their treasury. That's $13 billion. $13 billion that's sitting there in their treasury, most of it Ethereum, some Bitcoin, some cash, and some other company called 8Co that they invested in. That is a important technology for the future that has to do with proof of human, which in the future, you have this company called 8Co, and they are basically in bed with Sam Altman's WorldCoin, and together they are creating a technology and have the technology that when people are on the blockchain, rather than just trusting that somebody is sending you money and they're real, you'll have proof of human where they can scan your eyes and then see that you're actually a human. And so every time you go and log in, they'll know that you're a real person and not an AI or a bot trying to scam somebody or do bad things. Okay. So the reason I bring that up is because BitMine invested in that company when it was at $20 million and put a $20 million investment into it. And now they've 10x their investment on it. So that is in their treasury as well. So several $100 million in their treasury accounts from that dollar figure I just gave you. Okay. Number two, for BitMine, they added 179,000 Ethereum in October alone. That's another 820 million or whatever that is. And that's 2% of the entire ETH supply. So 2%, they're over 2% now. So that's a big deal. In 120 days, they now own 2.1 or 2.2% of the supply of Ethereum. That's a really, really big deal. Massive, massive growth. They're not staking ETH yet. So this slide's incorrect. They may stake ETH. And if they do stake the Ethereum, they will earn a yield off of that. So for example, let's say, call it a round number and say they've got 12 billion of Ethereum right now. So you take 12 billion of Ethereum and they stake it. They could get paid 3 to 4% on that 12 billion that they stake on the Ethereum network, which means that would be $360 million to $480 million a year coming in income to this company. You start to forecast these figures out into the future for BMNR, and let's say when they have $20 billion of Ethereum on the balance sheet, the staking income would be anywhere from $600 billion to $800 billion. So when you look at Wall Street might be hot on this stock, and why many people are hot in this stock is not only are they going to have a massive amount of Ethereum in their treasury, they're also going to have a ridiculous amount of income coming in from staking on the Ethereum network. All right, which is good for the Ethereum network if they do that. So we talked about this on some of my previous shows. If you did not see it, Peter Thiel owns 9% of BMNR. He's got major credibility. He's obviously one of the founders of PayPal, and he's got lots of cred with institutions as well. And that's why BMNR has a lot of cred right now. Kathy Wood's ARK Invest added BMNR exposure in their crypto innovation ETF as well. So another person who's a blue chip investor in the game here. And then when they first raised money for their treasury, they raised $250 million. To think that was only 120 days ago. And now they've got $13 billion in their treasury. That is BMNR. The ETH supply keeps shrinking due to staking and the burning of tokens, which reduces the circulation of the coins each month. So if you're wondering, do they have like a strategy to keep it scarce? They absolutely do. So as the supply keeps shrinking, that means the more in demand it's going to be. Wall Street likes Ethereum. If you did not watch my previous videos, you should go watch that because I break down like 100% how Wall Street is in bed with Ethereum at this point. We all know that the Genius Act has been passed. So the law has been passed. Now it needs to be implemented. If you don't know what the Genius Act is, basically it has to do with digital dollars, which are stable coins, meaning every digital dollar, aka stable coin, that is actually on a blockchain. Right now, 70% of them are on the Ethereum network. So every digital dollar that sits there on the Ethereum network has to be backed by a US dollar or a treasury bill. So now the banks are in bed with the stablecoin market on Ethereum. I was reading an article this morning that says the banks are a little concerned right now because the prediction is that the stablecoin market could eat up $6.6 trillion of bank deposits. And why that is a bad thing for bank deposits, because we all know that when you put money in the bank, they turn over your deposits over and over and over again. It's not just 9 times. It can be up to 15, 20 times. They keep turning over and leveraging your money. And that is how the game is played. So interesting. And this is a threat definitely to the banks. So if you can't beat them, join them. So you got Wall Street joining the game and going onto the blockchain. So I did an entire video on how Wall Street is going onto the blockchain. A lot of them are going onto Ethereum. You have PayPal has its own stable coin right now. You've got Swift, the Swift network that, basically sends messages that communicate from bank A to bank B and moves money. They are now testing on the blockchain right now, and think that $11 trillion runs through this organization because of what they do. That's a lot of money, and that's a huge player. So lots and lots of Wall Street players are moving on. Coinbase is already on. Robinhood's already on the blockchain. JP Morgan's building on the blockchain. Like it's happening. All right. So the whole stablecoin market's really interesting. And to see what's happening with the banks, that makes me very happy that the banks would lose their deposits and that people would be going on to the blockchain potentially in the future. So that is a hypothetical. It hasn't happened yet, but we will see. And additionally, if you want to get more into so if you want to get more into checking out, like if you want to know more about how all of this rolls, you can go get my book down below, Money Game. So it goes heavily into how the banks work and how they leverage your money, how the Fed works, how all traditional investments work. And at the same time, it goes heavily into Bitcoin, Ethereum, BMNR, MSTR, AI money wars, a little bit about my trading strategy. It's all in the book. So go get it. You can get it for free down below and just grab it. It's a great read. It's super data driven, and it literally points out the entire problem with the current economic system and what we can do about it. And with that said, I just want to give you a quick example, and we'll continue on with BMNR and MSTR. But I just want to show you something that's really interesting, because this is something to take a look at that anybody can take a look at for their own portfolio. And so this is basically, if you were to look at $100,000 investment, okay? And so if you see over here on the left, you got $100,000 investment. So you could play with this, and you could actually just go, it's a $100,000 investment or $1 million investment or $10,000 investment. The point of showing this is most people don't look at the rate of return on all their money. So if you're ever questioning Bitcoin, or you're ever questioning strategy or BMNR or any of these, like, why would I invest in these when I can get 10 to 12% in the market and I can just play it safe? Well, here, this actually proves why playing it safe in the market and just investing in the S&P, it's one of the reasons why people end up not being able to retire. So if you look here on the screen of a $100,000 investment, I'm going to show you how taxes, inflation, asset inflation, and fees literally destroy your wealth, okay? So, and again, if you want more on this, my book's down below. It goes in depth on all of this, all right? So initial investment, $100,000, okay? And then you look at the average stock market return. So let's say people are getting 12% in the stock market here. Then what you have to account for is inflation of 3% here. Now, this is CPI. So when the Fed comes on the news and they sit there and they talk about 3% inflation, they're talking about how much prices have risen as it relates to the basket of goods and services that they put in the basket. All right. So to some degree, the CPI, the inflation number that they report, it's not that it's not true. It's just doesn't tell the full story. All right. So if you're going to take into account a 10% or 12% return in your investments, it does, or even a 20% return. But for most people who don't know what's going on and aren't informed like we are on the show, they're thinking, I can get 12%, or if I do 10%, it would be amazing over the next 20 or 30 years. And so you have to take into account inflation, which is obvious, but most people never look at it. So they don't factor in, like, what will my money spend like in the future? So you definitely put in inflation, but there's another thing you need to include, which is down below, and I'm going to click on it here, which is called asset inflation. So if you want to know the effect of money printing, one of the big effects of money printing is asset inflation. You have too much money in the economy, too much money chasing too few goods. You have money pushing up house prices. You have the money being printed, pushing up college tuition. And so when you look at the average increase of like houses in the United States over the last several decades, the houses have gone up by 4.3%. All right. And you can look at different statistics that will show you 5, 6, 7% numbers or as of recent numbers. But let's just look over the last several decades and be conservative and say 4.3%. So you can't just look at CPI and inflation and go, it's 3%. And then I'm going to factor in a 3% inflation number, because it's just not real for people who want to go buy a house or people who want to send their kids to college. It's not a completely real number. And yes, a portion of the rents are included in the CPI, but the increase in home value is not included in the CPI. So the things that you want, the assets that you want to go buy, try saving for a house and going 5, 7 years into the future, be like, I'm ready to buy the house. And all of a sudden the house went up by 5% every year. Now that house that was, worth $500,000, 7 years later is now worth a hell of a lot more. That's called asset inflation. And so when you're calculating the rate of return on your money and you're looking in your investments, the general general people around the world, they're looking 10 to 12%. I'll do great and I'll be okay. No, after regular inflation, then asset inflation. And by the way, on colleges, the average increase on colleges over the last decade and several decades is 4.6% a year. And so when they're calculating and putting colleges and things into the actual CPI, which is the inflation number that Fed Powell, he steps up and says, here's the inflation, it's 3%, and blah, blah, blah. It's not including room and board. It's not including books. It's not including meals. And then look at all the college loans that have been given out, the amount of money that's been printed into the system to give loans at a low rate that then puts people in debt for the rest of their life. So you have this whole system that doesn't show you the true cost when you're investing, and it doesn't show you the true cost of putting $100,000 in the stock market, getting a 12% rate of return over time. You're looking at the number that you have at the end of 30 years. But if you don't take out taxes, inflation, fees, and asset inflation, then you don't have the real story. And this is why I call it the 10% lie in my book. Again, you can get it for free down below. It's free. I'm giving it away for free now. Once we put it on Amazon, it'll be paid. But you can get it for free now, the digital version. And that's why I call it the 10% lie. It's even the 12% lie, because 10 to 12% over time will keep people poor, period. You don't get ahead with 10 to 12% rate of returns because you had asset inflation. And then you need to go look at your fund fees. If you own a 401k plan, look right here. You see where it says fund fees? Yeah. Look at your 401k plan. Look at your mutual funds. Go look at the fees that you're being charged. If you're being charged by a financial advisor, if you're being charged with mutual fund fees, or you're being charged 401k plan fees, go look at the damn fees. Over 30 years, a 1% management fee can wipe out up to 30% of your wealth. That means if you think you're going to have $1 million in 30 years, you got 700,000. It ain't 1% the way you see it, right? When you think 1%, 1%, no big deal, right? Go look at the fund fees. Look at them. All right. I worked in the financial service business at 21 years old. I was a kid in the course room going, hey, like, why are the fees? What's up with the 1.15% fee? Like, why is 10% good? I don't understand. You got to go look at the fees. All right. Even just hosting your money on a platform, true story. I have a trust, and so I was talking with one of my trust advisors, and long story short, I decided to take my assets back so I can manage them, because I didn't want them sitting in a trust. And so I took my assets back, and I got offered to keep it on the platform. And the financial advisor had told me, hey, you can keep it on the platform. You can just keep it on our platform. You need to put it on your platform. I'm like, well, why would I keep it on your platform? He goes, well, we just have our own platform. I'm like, is there a fee for doing that? He's like, yeah, 25 basis points, which is 0.25%. If I were to keep that amount of money on that platform for the next 20, 30 years, it would drain my wealth. Make sense? So you got to look at the hidden fees, my friends. Got to look at the hidden fees. If your financial advisor is doing one hell of a job, go look at what that's going to be worth over 30 years and project it out and be like, hey, how much is that going to cost me on it? If I'm going to have $1 million, 500,000, 2 million, 10 million, 100 million in 30 years, like how much is that going to cost me in fees over 30 years? Go look. Okay. And then if you think they do a great job, be like, hey, I'll just pay you a flat fee to manage my money rather than taking it all my assets. Make sense? All right. So not financial advice, not tax advice, just giving you a theoretical thing here. So you take a fund fees, and then you look at, like, if you wanted to put debt balances in, you could, but like, I'm just going to take debt out because it's going to be like a shock if I show you it with debt, because this is looking at the rate of return of all your money. Does this make sense? If you don't look at the rate of return on all your money, then you don't really know, like where you're going. So if you have $100,000 that earns 12%, look down here. At the end of 10 years, you got $210,000. Everybody see that? You got $210,000 at the end of 10 years. All right. So that's at 12%. But now when you factor in taxes, so just assume a 20% tax bracket, a management fee of 1%. You could play around with it and say it's 0.5% or whatever yours is. Inflation, which is here, money printing, which causes asset inflation and debasement. And then when you look at what $100,000 spends like, look at the lower right-hand column over here. Oh my goodness, what just happened? Okay, we're back. If you look at the lower right-hand column, you see that where it says $126,000. So you think that $100,000 over a 10-year period is going to grow to $210,000, which is what you see in your bank account. But when you take out taxes and inflation and fees and all that stuff, it really spends like $126,000. So you start off with $100,000 and 10 years later, it feels like $126,000. Sound familiar? Okay, this is what's going on in the marketplace. It's wild. And this is what's happening to people all over the world, thinking like, and the people who are putting their money in CDs, bless them, right? Or bonds. Oh my God. Like you might as well fly a plane 250 miles per hour into a 500-mile headwind. That's bonds. All right. At least with stocks that earn 12%, you could be flying 250 miles per hour and maybe get a 200 mile per hour headwind. At least you're going somewhere. So this is the deal. All right. Also, you could look at this and you could calculate in and look at your debt. I learned this at 22 from a system called personal financial engineering, where you look at the rate of return on all your money. So if I have inflow and I'm like, I'm earning off my $1 million, I'm earning 10% a year in the stock market, I'm making $100,000 a year. So, okay, taxes, inflation, fees, but what about debt payments? Because money that flows in, what about the money that flows out? If you got $50,000 in debt that you're paying, 10% a year on, that's $5,000 a year. You just chopped away a huge chunk of your actual real returns. Hence, why most of the population goes to retire and they can't retire and they end up retiring and feeling poor. This is why. This is a very, very important conversation and the world needs to wake up to this. Super important, okay? So that is what goes on. That's the money game calculator. We created it for our brand. Hope it serves you. Let's go back to BMNR and MSTR, right? So all of that, Wall Street likes Ethereum because it's useful. Now, if you look at Ethereum of why it's useful, one of the reasons why Wall Street's moving is because they want to tokenize the bonds, real estate, and stocks. This is already happening. So basically, you have financial institutions out there. They're like, hey, people buy our stocks, right? We're going to put it on the blockchain, wrap it up in a token. And instead of people buying our stock and trading our stock 7 or 10 hours a day, they can trade it 24/7, 365, and we never shut down on the blockchain. So why would Wall Street want to move to the blockchain? Because they can literally print and mint money 24/7, 365 instead of 10 hours a day. Huge move. So tokenization is a big, big move. We know digital dollars and the Stablecoin Act is a huge thing of why the banks are actually like already in bed with the blockchain and already in bed with Ethereum, which is the largest stablecoin market. So this is a big deal, right? Now you have BMNR is the only public company holding ETH at this scale. So the amount that they have in their treasury is massive. They are the number one company on this. Tom Lee calls ETH a discount to the future, which means it's a steal, is basically what he's saying at this price point, and it's undervalued. And he targets potentially in a super bullish case, let's call this, because he said 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, he's even said 15,000. So I would definitely not take this as the gospel. This would be like an extreme bullish case at the end of 2025. And go back to my previous slides and just go look at if Bitcoin does this, ETH will likely do this. It's that simple. Do the math, right? Anything could happen in a bull run, but if you be more conservative with it, then at the end of the day, that conservative numbers will set you up for whatever your strategy is, okay? Standard Chartered Bank, highly trusted bank, been around for a long time, has lots of big clients, government clients, corporate clients, so they can't throw around numbers and get egg on their face. So they come in with a prediction for Ethereum at $7,500 by 2025, possibly $14,000 by 2026. So this seems like an indication that some people are in agreement with that we might run into 2026 and continue with the run of companies like BMNR buying Ethereum, putting it on their balance sheet, companies like strategy, buying Bitcoin, put it on their balance sheet, and maybe we have a run into 2026 that maybe looks like, like a whale moving through the water rather than a damn roller coaster, right? I would say prepare for the roller coaster and hope for the smooth whale, or the dolphin, I should say, going through the water. Some people think in 2026, we will continue to stabilize, maybe run up more. I'm planning for the peak to happen at the end of 2025. I could be totally wrong. I'm just planning for it. That's all I'm saying. Okay. And I'm planning for a drop coming at some point. So ETH is the core layer. Like, why is ETH important? It's definitely, they were the first ones there. Wall Street's going to be conservative to some degree. Wall Street, I'm sure, is doing things on Solana right now as well. But ETH is one of the talked about chains when it has to do with Wall Street, and not just talked about, the action that Wall Street is taking. They're already building on the chain. So it's already happening. This is not like a hypothetical. This is happening right now. All right. So it's important for the integration of these institutions. And, why did PayPal do it? PayPal created their own stable coin because, if you're looking for a settlement of transactions with PayPal, that money doesn't settle right away. It has the appearance that it settles right away, but it still goes through the standard banking deals. And so it can settle in 1 to 2 to 3 days. And so when you're looking at going onto the blockchain, PayPal created its own stablecoin with the idea that, very simple, they want their money to settle instantly. And that's what the blockchain does. They also want more security. That's what the blockchain does. And ETH has never been down for a moment. So ETH is more trusted, okay, in the eyes of some of the Wall Street people, okay? So somebody's asking me, what is my prediction for MSTR this year? I think if you want to look at the prediction for MSTR, I think here's what you need to look at, okay? And we're going to MSTR right now, so that's a good timing for it. BMNR will finish with this. They want to get 5% of all the Ethereum. They will do it. I'm pretty sure about that. So here's what MSTR could do again in the bull run, okay? So let's go over the principles of why MSTR is has the chance to run in the next couple months. And I think it's just going back to basic principles to look at what this company is. Obviously, it's been eating crow and just not moving a lot, and moving just sideways down to Bitcoin all over the place. Now, in bull runs, these treasury companies have the potential to run big. And so that includes BMNR and that includes MSTR. So when you look at every $10,000 move in Bitcoin, that adds about $6.4 billion to their balance sheet for MSTR. All right. Now, if you want to look at where they could go, where do you think Bitcoin's going to go? That's the first question. Right. So that's the first thing to think about. Like, where could Bitcoin go? And so if you go back to the beginning slides that we were looking at, like, where do you think Bitcoin will go? Now, if we fast forward on this, I'm just going to give you, I'll come back here, but here's the vote that Saylor put out. He said, what will Bitcoin end the year above? Will Bitcoin end the year above $150,000? And so he took a poll, and based on the poll, it says, yes, 77% of the people who answered the poll think Bitcoin will be above 150,000. 22% say no. That's 83,000 votes. That's a pretty good amount of data there. So 83,000 votes. So that means a good portion of people think it's going to be above 150,000. I too think Bitcoin will go above 150,000. Now, it will go somewhere then between probably 150 and 200 potentially. So with that, you then look at, what is that increase? So if Bitcoin goes to 165, let's say, and right now it's at 120, all right, that is a 40% increase roughly from here. So that's 40%. All right. So the question then becomes, like, how much will strategy run its MNAV? Meaning basically it's trading at a premium to the Bitcoin that it has on its balance sheet. And so the premium that it's trading, people are willing to pay like 20% more for the stock in comparison to its Bitcoin value. And so it's one of the lowest that it's been. It's been recently around 1.3 hovering. It dropped to 1.19 maybe today or the other day. And historically, it's been a 2, 3, 4, or 5. That means it trades at a double to its Bitcoin holdings. So will it go back to a 2x? Will it go back to a 3? I don't think we'll see a 3x. We saw that in 2024. It was massive. Could it go back to a 2? So right now, the chances are between 1.2 and 2, let's say. So if you think that Bitcoin's going to go up 40% in the next couple months, if you think Bitcoin's going to go up 60% in the next couple months, then you add the premium of like strategy going up by an additional amount compared to what Bitcoin goes up. So could it be a double? I think that if it was super bullish, I think we could have a double. If it's conservative, I think the MNAV is going to go back to a 1.5. I think we're definitely going to hit that in the bull run. At some point, we'll see that, is my personal viewpoint. Could I be wrong? I could be wrong. But we could get some serious traction and movement with MSTR over the next two months, because as Bitcoin runs up, then strategy will follow. And we've seen like moments of Bitcoin running, and strategy hasn't done that, right? Remember when we had the big run up to 125 and like people are like, what's going on with strategy? We've seen strategy kind of just stalling for the last couple of months. But when euphoria gets big and when then things start taking off, which I think they will in the next 2 months, October is the name of October and Moonvember is the name of November, then we'll see what happens. And we'll see if strategy moons up even more. So you can base your model on what you think is going to happen based on the data I just shared, okay? So 77% think Bitcoin's going to be above 150,000. What do you guys think in the chat? We'll see. All right. So back to strategy, and let's go back to getting some basics on certainty of like where strategy is going. Okay. So every $10,000 move in Bitcoin adds 6.4 billion to their balance sheet. They're already up big. So let's not forget that this company has spent like $47 billion acquiring Bitcoin. Depending on Bitcoin's price, they're anywhere from 70 to $80 billion of Bitcoin. So they've got something like 20-something billion dollars of unrealized gains. All right. And part of the excitement recently was we hope strategy gets added to the S&P 500. They did not. And we will have another opportunity for strategy in December. So what could happen in December if they get added to the S&P 500? Now, why will they check the box in December? Because we're going to have a massive run on Bitcoin, and assuming Bitcoin's still up at that time, when they get a chance to get voted on again, strategy's treasury will be massive and their unrealized gains will be huge. And so the voters who either open the door and shut the door for the S&P 500, the people who are in charge, will either say yay or nay. If you look at the stocks that did get added to the S&P 500 recently, they shot up through the roof. And so that could have been a reality for strategy. So that definitely took some sail out of the wind for people who were expecting that. And we did not see the wind go. We saw the wind die. All right. So that's where they sit from a treasury standpoint. Institutional trust, 60% of shares are held by Vanguard, State Street, Capital Group, Norges Bank. So we've got massive institutional trust on this. With 60% of the shares being owned. So what will happen with institutions over the next couple months? What will happen with retail? We'll find out. And the Bitcoin per share keeps rising, 25% year to date. So the whole goal of the company is to add more Bitcoin per share. And they continue to do that by acquiring more Bitcoin. And they're still buying. September was more quiet, but they, added several hundred million in Bitcoin in September. So we got that. And, whether this is smarter funding or not, you can kind of say yay or nay to the slide. They're using equity raises. So they use equity to acquire Bitcoin, but they use it in different ways. We have their preferred stock as well. So we have all these different products of Strike and Stride and Strife and Stretch. Stretch has become a very popular product. People compare it to kind of like a money market fund, but they have all kinds of different ways to raise capital and acquire Bitcoin on the balance sheet. They also sometimes issue more shares, which is dilutive temporarily, but if their Bitcoin value goes up, it's accretive to the shareholders, which means more Bitcoin per share, all right? And they have very little debt. So you're talking about like $8 billion of debt on the balance sheet. So when you look at the capital that they have, like 72 or $80 billion to $8 billion of debt, like, the company overall is in extremely good shape. Now, that does nothing for us as the shareholders who are like, hey, we want to see this stock price moon, but these are the fundamentals to look at, okay? And we've had billions and billions of ETF inflows for Bitcoin. I think we had 3.2 billion in the first week of October alone. So there's still lots of money flowing into Bitcoin, which creates a bullish scenario for us moving into the end of October, the second half of October, and November. So that's exciting as well. Outperformance versus Bitcoin. So from August 2020 to August 2025, a $10,000 Bitcoin would be, goes up to $100 and something thousand, and that same $10,000 in strategy goes up to $320 something thousand. So strategy outperforms over the 5-year period. Could it do it again over the next couple months? And that's the big question. I am still holding my bags as well and waiting for it to run. So when Bitcoin moves, this is historically what we've seen. When Bitcoin moves 10%, strategy sometimes moves 15% or 20%. That also happens in the other direction. So when Bitcoin moves down, strategy moves far down. And right now, when Bitcoin's moving, strategy's not moving in sync with it. So it's a very different game. So we'll see in the second half of October and November, I believe that will change. So the only pure Bitcoin equity play of this scale, if you look at strategy, like nobody's even close. What he's done has been incredible, and hats off to what Saylor has done and what he's created. He's created an incredible company. He's set the pace for companies all across the planet. And, if you look at their treasury compared to really, really large companies like Meta and Berkshire Hathaway, I mean, they're like high up on the list. They have tons of money in their treasury. So they're a very, very exciting company. So again, Bitcoin pulled back. MSTR falls harder on dips. So this is like why the excitement dip. This is part of the reason. They sold shares to raise capital. So there was a whole thing about this that they put out in their shareholders meeting where they said, hey, we're not going to issue more shares to acquire more Bitcoin unless our stock is trading at a premium to our Bitcoin value. And then they went back on that and they said, no, we're going to change that. So there was kind of a little back and forth in their strategy, a little bit of what they said they were going to do and then what they did. But, you can't, for the most part, Saylor's done everything he said he's going to do. So you got to really just take your hat off to him. And this is an example of when you ask about more Bitcoin per share for strategy. They're stacking more sats per share. So this is a post by Saylor that was reposted by Strategy, and it shows the amount of sats per share that the company had in 2020. And so for people who are long-term shareholders of Strategy, you want them to get more Bitcoin per share or more sats per share in this analogy. And so when you look at the lower left, the sats per share was around 56,000 in 2020. And now the sats per share is 199,000. So you're looking at like a 3.5x where they've been accumulating more Bitcoin per share and more sats per share, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool, right? And then there's the vote. 77% of voters believe Bitcoin will finish 2025 above 150K. What do you think? Let me know. And now look at the treasury. Look at the corporate treasuries here, and we see Berkshire Hathaway, we see Amazon, we see Google, we see Microsoft, and now we see Strategy with $80 billion in their treasury. Berkshire Hathaway is king of the mountain here with $344 billion. The difference is they hold a different vehicle in their treasury than Strategy holds Bitcoin. All right, and then the video is right below with $57 billion. So it shows how they stack up and what a strong company they are overall. So that is the weather and the sports, my friends. If you want to learn more about what's happening with BMNR and Ethereum, you can go watch some of the previous videos that goes in depth about why Wall Street's moving there, and I think you'd enjoy that. If you'd like to get a copy of my free book, it's down below. It's called Money Game. It walks you through strategy, BMNR, Ethereum, Bitcoin, inflation, how the Fed works. It stacks up and compares traditional investments like 401k plans, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, gold. Talks about the history of money, so you can see where the lie began with money and when money started to become manipulated, and why Bitcoin's so important. So it's down below. You can snag it for free. I hope you enjoy it. And ultimately, this is a fun time. So enjoy the game. That's why I called this channel Money Game. Enjoy the game. You know, we all have losses on things. We all have wins, but you got to kind of take them in stride, and you got to gear up for the next win. So we've been going through a tough time with strategy over the last months and months and months and months. And now it's like, okay, let's gear up for the win. Let's not lose hope when October and November historically have been fantastic. So let's see how we run, and watch and study BMNR, because it's going to be a phenomenal company. There's too much power behind this and too much acceleration behind this for this thing not to be an extremely meaningful company in the world of the blockchain and in the world of the stock market. So pay attention, and I hope you all have a tremendous rest of the day, and hope you're all doing great, and stay strong with all this, and I hope this serves you, and I'll be back for more this week. All right, stay well, and talk to you soon.